So with any kind of vector path that you make, you often will want to color it. So I can make a simple shape here and I can choose a color for it. Maybe I want it to be red. But sometimes I don't want just a solid color. I want that color to range in value from light to dark. And I can do that with what's called a gradient tool. There are 3 different ways to access the gradient tool on here. One is over here in your panel. You can also come to the gradient tool over here, which is going to bring up your whole gradient window. If you can't find it in either of those places, you can always come up here to the top to window and select the gradient window that way. So if I come back and it's not checked, I can click on it and it'll bring that gradient window up for me. Now again, I'm working in the Essentials Classic workspace, so everything's out in front and I can see it. There are 3 different types of gradients I can use. The first one is a linear gradient. And you can see that with a linear gradient, the colors are shifting from one side to the other. In this case, I have light on the left and dark on the right. If I wanted to invert that, I could come over to my panel and use this little reverse gradient button. I click on it and it shifts the dark to the left side and the light to the right side. Toggle it back. I want the dark on the right. And you can get to it both from this panel, or you can also get to it by clicking on the tool when you have your object selected, and it'll bring the gradient tool up right on top of your object. That makes it nice for things like this little slider diamond in the middle. I'm clicking and dragging to change where the gradient is most intense or least intense. And so I can slide that. If I want an object to be really dark, I might do it over here. As soon as you click on the color, you get your swatch panel usually comes up as the default. So I could just choose a color here. So let's say I want to change this color to something similar to the pink, and I click on it and I'm not seeing that option in my swatch panel. Then I can come and choose my palette over here. And with the palette, you can set your colors. So you notice over here, I can set it to grayscale, RGB. I have it on CMYK because I'm working with the print format. And here you can just slide your tools. So if I want it to be a more intense magenta, I can slide it here. I'm going to go for something that's maybe just a little bit more grayed out. Okay. And so that's how you can change the colors on your gradient. You can also add more color to your gradient. So for example, let's say I wanted to work with a complementary color scheme. So I'm going to change this to a blue, a really dark blue. And I'm going to change this to an orange. But I want more variety in my color scheme, so I'm going to add some more colors. As soon as I come along my gradient line, and again you can do this here in the panel or you can do it on the actual object, if I click, I can add new colors in. So say I wanted to have something that was a little more yellowy, and then I want to add in something that's maybe a little bit lighter blue, maybe more along the cyan color. So I'm still sticking with my oranges and blues, but I'm just adding more richness and depth. So you can actually add as many colors to the gradient as you want. And you'll see that when you add more colors, you get new sliders that pop up that allow you, again, to sort of shift where that color blending is happening. So let's say I have an object that's a sphere. The linear gradient doesn't look very believable on that kind of shape. So that's where you might use something like your radial gradient. So I'm going to come over here and click Radial Gradient. And you can see right away, it changes it so that the gradient is going from a center point out radially around. If you click on the gradient tool here and bring it up, you can actually shift where the gradient is. So if I want it to look like the light is coming off from the side, I can move it off in a direction like this, which is kind of fun. Now it's starting to look more like a sphere. So the radial gradient gives you more options. And with the radial gradient, you can also do all kinds of things. I can click and expand where the gradient is happening. I can click up here and I can rotate or squish the gradient around. So there's all different commands. This, you can see the cursor changes to a turning one, so I can rotate where the light's coming from. So there's all different kinds of commands in here. So the third type of gradient is what's called a freeform gradient. So I'm going to take this object here and I'm going to choose my third option, the freeform gradient. And what this does is it allows me to shift my colors in any direction. So I could bring this light way up here. I could kind of bring this dark around. You can just click and drag, and each of these allows you to add more colors. So same thing, I can just click around and add colors all over. If you want to get rid of a color, click on it and just hit the delete key. So let's say I've moved my freeform gradient around in this direction. Now I can come back with just a single stroke, and I could draw in some lines. And now all of a sudden I have something that looks very cube-like. So those are your gradient tools. Now please be careful with gradients. They're a little bit like glitter. They're super fun to play with, and you can just get lost in them and spend hours on them. So don't lose sight of your main project. Use the gradients to help you, but don't let them get in your way.